What's up, Moto Buddies? Mike here, Taco Moto and Baja Taco Tours. I've got a bike that I've been waiting to get my hands on for a long time now, quite a few months. This is, to me, I think, the second most exciting bike of 2023 as far as KTM new model releases are concerned. The other one, maybe a little bit more exciting, is the 23 450 XCF. We're gonna take that bike and strip it down. It's waiting for that to happen. And so the other new bike that we were able to get our hands on this year is this 23 450 XCF-W. So this is a unique and new model, and I'm going to go through and explain and break down why this is a special bike and then what makes it unique in its category. Let's start with comparing this to like a 500 EXC-F, which is, there are three bikes that are based on that platform, and this one is the newest version of that design. And so let's talk about this bike if it was a 500 EXC-F and what it would have on it. So that would be a street legal bike, a 50-state street legal bike. It would have reflectors here on the forks. It would have turn signals, which this does not have. It would have left and right master control switches. So over here it would have the standard street legal toggle on and off switch, and over here it would have a light or switch rather that would have headlight controls, turn signal, horn. It would have a unique wiring harness that would be specific to that bike, so it could have those street legal functions. It would have a big rear end assembly back here. You've seen them for the license plate. It's a really big turn signal. It mounts to the under fender here. It just secures to that. It's a secondary removable piece. It would have mirrors and perches. So up here you'd have your brackets to install your mirrors. It would have an emissions system. This hole right here, there's another matching hole on the other side. This hose for the gas tank would come off. It would go into some little connectors here that would fit into that hose. And then there would be on the side of the head here, let's see if you can see that, there's a little 8mm bolt right there. That would be an inlet port for the vapors. And then there would be a solenoid that would live in this little cavity right here. This is by your left foot, and that's the control. And so some of those features would be there for vapor recovery. You'd also have an O2 sensor that would be in the header there. The muffler on that bike would be the same canister. It would have a different end cap. You would have this end cap here, and so this has a bung, a restrictor bung, and then it has a cheese grater plate that goes here on the back, and that would exactly replace this one here. You'd have 70/30 tires. They would be quiet tires. You would not have rim locks because of the street orientation of the tires. You'd have a little rubber damping, sound damping ring that would be on that primary sprocket right there. That's pretty much an overview of the things you would have if this bike was an EXC-F. And then just to point out a couple of quick things. So there's a fan on here. There's a thermostat. It's got 196 watt electrics, same as that bike. It's got a 42mm throttle body. It's got a 6-speed wide transmission. And this one, well, and then so to finish out, the 500 would be street legal, 50 state emissions compliant, and it would be a green sticker bike. Those would be all the things that this machine would have to turn it into an EXC-F. So what if this specific machine was the 500 XCFW? What would be unique about that? So that would have its own harness. It would be a different harness than the EXC-F. It would have a push-pull headlight switch like this one does. That's how you turn the headlight on and off. It would have a map switch. It would have these types of motocross style start and kill switches. It would have this exact rear tailpiece. It would not have the license plate. It would not have turn signals. It would have rim locks in the tires. It would have these type of off-road tires. It would have the same emissions. Everything that we talked about as far as emissions go on the street legal bike, it would have all of those functions. It would have a slightly restrictive exhaust end cap. It would have this one here. It would still have the obstructive bung, but it would not have the cheese grater here at the end. Those off-road bikes get a skid plate where the EXC-F does not. It would have the same engine, the same tranny. It would have slightly different ECU mapping just to accommodate the lack of the cheese grater there on the back. That bike would not be street legal, but it would be green sticker approved for California, so it would be emissions compliant. Now let's cover this exact bike. So this is unique altogether in its own category, and what makes this one unique but the same as the other ones. So with this one, it has its own harness. So this is the third version of a harness for this bike, and it shares a lot of those same configurations that we just talked about with the XCFW, the 500. You got the map switch, you got those start and kill switches. You have this, you have a headlight here on this bike, just like you do with the other XCF, the 500 version. The differences. Now let's talk about what this does not have. This is not emissions controlled. This is not a green sticker bike. This is a red sticker bike. So this is a competition use only model. So the 450 is competition only. The 500 is emissions compliant, green sticker versus red sticker. And because this is a competition, you don't have emissions. This comes right in and pops into a little hole here. You don't have the vapor recovery, don't have an O2 system, don't have the vapor recovery solenoid down there on the bottom. You don't have the damper on the primary gear like we talked about on the XCFWs. And this has the exact same tranny wide ratio as both versions of the 500. So in essence, what you have with this bike, oh, and also the one other thing I forgot to mention is reeds in the intake. So both versions of the 500, which are green sticker compliant, have reeds in the intake. This does not have reeds. The end cap on this bike is unique to it, where it has no restrictive bung. This is completely wide open here. It has the same outlet diameter as the two 500 models, no cheese grater, no restrictive port. It has a resonator. This can uses, so the resonator is essentially like a little ice cream cone device that is a sound damper. It also acts to move the power band around it. So it's sort of a shapeshifter as far as the power band goes. The EXC and the XCFW, so the 500 models, this is a muffler off those bikes. And this has a resonator, and it's down here at the bottom. This is the inlet, this is the outlet. So on the two 500s, it's there. It's down inside towards the inlet. Here, as we saw, it's out here at the outlet, so it's just reversed. And that's just to change the power dynamics. So the 500s are essentially tractors. Those are long stroke engines, and that's how they're 500s, is they have the same piston as the 450 bike, they just are a long stroke. So that's where they get a 500. Those bikes, what I tell people is essentially, if you want a bike that will pull away from a stop in third gear, that's what you get a 500 for. 500 provides this really broad and low power band, torque down low. If you want a lot more mid-range and top end, then you want a short stroke, and that's what the 450 engine does. And to promote that mid-range to top end, they just have moved the resonator back there towards the end. So here are the three, and then this is the motocross. We'll talk about that last. So this is the can, and then you have the EXC-F cap obstruction, about 80% obstructed with the cheese grater. This is just to soften the low end sound. That's just for sound. Then you have the XCF 500 XCFW, same obstruction, no cheese grater. This muffler is a little bit louder. It's not street legal. This one is. This one's not. And then you have this exact bike, no obstruction, no choke points, no spark arrestor, resonator in the other can, resonator in this one as well. And then when you take a look at the motocross cap, this is significantly wider, so it's a wide mouth. This will not fit. This diameter here is too big. All three of these bikes use a different exhaust, different muffler than the motocross. This is a different muffler for the motocross bikes, and then the header pieces are different than on the motocross bike. So the exhaust systems do not transfer over. So this is not a motocross specific engine with some of those other features. This bike is basically, again, built off of the 2500 model platforms. It uses a different muffler like we talked about, and then no emissions. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. You're looking at a 500 short stroke with a different muffler, different end cap, different mapping, and none of the emission controls that are on the 500. Compared to the 450 motocross bike, what would be unique and different if this was a 450 motocross? Well, you would not have headlight, you would not have lighting. You would have a unique harness all on its own. Motocross bike would not have a 196 watt stator like this one does. So all three of these bikes, the 2500s and this 450, have 196 watt stator. Motocross has a 70 watt stator. It also does not have the same large flywheel like on these three bikes. It has a very light flywheel. All three of these bikes have the same crank. It's a heavy crank. The motocross bike has a very light crank. Motocross has unique head and a specific camshaft, and then very unique mapping for that. It has its own exhaust like we talked about. The motocross has a 44 millimeter throttle body where these have 42s. Motocross has air forks. These are oil chamber forks. These are the Explorer 48s. All three of these XCFWs have 48. The Explorer 48 forks, and then the Explorer shock. All three of these bikes have a PDS. The motocross has a swing arm. It has a link style swing arm. All three of these bikes have a cast triple clamp, and that's just for bump compliance, for smoothness. These are much more flexible triple clamps. The motocross bike has CNC. Motocross has no thermostat, no fan, no speedo. All three of these bikes do have a speedo. And MX bike has close ratio 5-speed. So that would be the differentiators if this was a motocross bike here. KTM has upgraded the chassis, so this is in 23, this is the all-new chassis. In 22 and a half, the factory edition motocross bikes had the new chassis, and then they rolled out in 23 across the platform. All XCF and SXFs have this new updated chassis that I just showed. And then in 24, all of the Enduro, this is an Enduro class bike, all the Enduro bikes will get the new updated chassis. So all the EXC-Fs, XCF-Ws, and then the cross-country two-stroke bike models will get that as well. So the final analysis of this machine is, like we've been discussing, this is really a 500 XCFW without any of the emissions and with a short stroke crank. Other than that, you're essentially looking at that exact bike. So could you turn your 500 into a 450 in terms of emissions for race use, competition use only? Absolutely, easily done. Can you turn your 500 into a 450 by swapping out your conrod? Yes, you can do that. So that's an option as well. So you can go internally into your engine and turn your 500 into a 450. I'm not sure it would be worth it. The 450 has different power dynamics because of its short stroke, has a faster rev up, and then it has better mid to top end with higher piston speeds. So the question always, comes up from guys. They want to know, should you turn a motocross bike into a enduro bike and vice versa? And there's so many things to change. It's, in my opinion, no. I don't recommend it when guys go down the road and they say, but I can get a motocross bike so cheap. Motocross bikes don't hold their value. That's something too important to talk about. A motocross bike like this one here has very low resale value. These things drop really quickly in value. And one of the reasons why the enduro bikes hold their value so much better is because the enduro bikes are more attractive to vet riders who are a little bit more financially stable and a little more willing to spend more money for the bike, for the accessories, for the equipment. They outfit these for dual sport riding and for enduro type riding, where a motocross guy typically will just race it or ride it as is. He won't need to do a whole lot. The market tends to be saturated with motocross bikes because these bikes are attracted, mainly they're ridden by guys who are just using them at the track, maybe a little bit of trail riding, but they are not suitable for trail riding. We talked about all the things that a motocross bike does not have that you need and want when you're out trail riding or enduro or dual sporting. And these guys tend to flip these bikes pretty quickly. You will see at a motocross track generally newer machines, so there's a lot more of them out there, and the market is just typically depressed in terms of resale value. It's lower. When you get into the highest value bike, it's the EXC-F with the street or with a 50 state title, so you can get a license plate in any of the 50 states with an EXC-F. So now you've got national resaleability for an EXC-F. The EXC-F again is more attracted to a vet rider, and it's easier to turn an EXC-F. So a guy will say, yeah, but I don't want the turn signals, I don't want the mirrors, I don't want all that stuff, I'm going to race it. No problem. It's a very simple procedure to essentially downgrade an EXC-F in terms of just removing components to turn it into a race bike, as opposed to going in that other direction where you take a motocross bike and turn it into a dual sport bike. So it's always our opinion that you're better off removing some things than trying to add some things in terms of the enduro bike versus motocross bike. We'll go out and ride test this thing and get some impressions. In one word, y'all, incredible. Super, super rad. So just burned an hour on this thing, did a break-in. Our technique is hard. Ride it hard, aggressive roll-ons, aggressive roll-offs through the gears, all RPMs. We race them, basically, right out of the box. There's no, like, warm-up heat cycles. There's none of that slow, steady, gradually increasing RPMs to break these bikes in. We just rip them. It'll get an oil change here when I head back. So it's everything I hoped it'd be. The 450 is an eager motor. It's super peppy. It's very, very energetic, very lively, really easy to rip the front wheel up because this is correctly fueled for what is almost an open muffler. Now, you still have a small diameter, somewhat sound restrictive end cap there compared to the 500 XCF. That's an improvement. There's no bung. You saw that. We covered that. So in stock trim, as it sits right now, this bike is crazy good, wicked fast, really easy to stay in the power band everywhere. So if you've ridden a 350, you know that it's a little bit lacking on the low end. There's not a lot of torque off the bottom. To get into the power band, you need to be around 5,000 RPM. You keep it singing, run it at gear low, keep the RPMs up, almost a little bit like riding a two-stroke without a automatic power valve. So you just get used to that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that engine. The 350 is fantastic. I spent an entire year riding one as an experiment. I never spent a lot of time on a 350, so we bought one and spent 1 year riding it exclusively, 3 trips to Baja, maybe 4, and it did great. I was surprised. I surprised myself how much I liked it, how well it did, how competent it was in all kinds of situations. Tons of single track, tons of forest. Did great everywhere. The only issue is just that you keep it in the mid revs to get into the power. Does fine. So it's a little bit of demanding bike, just requires a lot of attention. Then when you're on the 500, because it's a tractor, it'll pull in any gear. You can ride it in the wrong gear and still get out of trouble. You can still pull the front wheel up. The 350, I think I've mentioned this kind of analogy before. The 350 is a little bit like a Honda Civic RR, a little 4-cylinder, high strung. Keep it in the revs, fun. The 500 is like a big Power Stroke diesel stump puller. The 450 is this really torquey, not quite where the 500 is, but very torquey, very capable of pulling the front wheel up, getting you out of trouble in almost any gear. Not quite as forgiving as the 500, but very lively. So the 450 is essentially the sweet spot if you're a fast, aggressive rider and you don't need that luggability of the 500. The 500 takes a moment or two to come on. It'll rip. So like with the Graves slip-on, a Getty CU or an Amy CU, all dialed in, the 500 is a genius motor. Unbelievable. So good. The 450 has an edge. The 450 spools up faster, hits harder, punches you in the face a bit harder. It's angrier, it's more aggressive. It is the sweet spot. So it's the Goldilocks size. So having a 450 now as an open class bike is a great move. And this is a fantastic execution. Where does this bike need anything? So suspension is essentially the stock WP XCF-W setup. It feels like it should. It's very predictable. It does well to almost to the limits. So you can push this pretty hard and it'll come and surprise you a little bit on some, especially if you're on a whoop road. The back end is a little too demanding. It takes too much attention to keep it in check. It's not super forgiving at high speeds. It obviously is not, if you're buying this bike and you're going to race the 1000 on it, you're not going to keep the stock setup. You're going to completely get it all dialed in. And we have a fantastic formula. We have an in-house suspension shop now. So our formula is fantastic. So that'll be the very first thing I do to this is pull the shock and the forks, give it to Ryan, get it all dialed in. Power is amazing for a stock bike. It's exceptional. It is as good as a stock motocross bike. So will we do anything to it? Of course. We're going to pop a Graves on there. We'll throw a Get and a name and we'll get a tune. We'll get it all dialed in. Chuck Graves is working on a header for this. So this will put a little excitement under him to finish that project. I know with material shortages and labor shortages and other things, it's taken longer, but finally we're excited to get a full titanium system for this class bike, 450 through 501. As far as much more, I honestly don't know that this bike needs much more. It doesn't even need that. You don't need suspension. You don't need more power. This bike has plenty of that for everybody who's not going to race. Every weekend rider, every Sunday slayer, everybody who doesn't want to dive in to that depth, you don't have to. This machine, fully stock, just as it sits, is ready to go. Impressively so. The ceiling, though, is really high if you do want to get into some of that stuff like we talked about. And this is a Baja 1000 podium bike right here. What you'll see is a lot of the guys, as they get ready for the Score Series, and so some of the other Western State Open Class Series, this will be the bike on the podiums. And it's got what it takes. So what is the difference? This is something I had a conversation just the other day with somebody. What is the difference between a motocross bike and an enduro bike? Why are the motocross bikes designed the way they are? What's the engineering concept behind them? And then what's the engineering concept behind an enduro bike? So a motocross bike is essentially a drag race machine. A motocross race is a drag race. The gate drops and you are wide open to the first turn. And then you are wide open to the jump. And then you are wide open to the next turn. And so on and on and on. And so you're essentially going... A motocross bike really only has two speeds. It has idle and wide open. And the goal is to get to wide open, to get to peak horsepower as quickly as possible. And so that's why there's no flywheel effect, no crank effect, very aggressive camshaft. That's why a motocross bike makes a terrible desert bike for negotiating single track, for doing trails, because the power is so snappy and rough and peaky and aggressive. It is demanding and fatiguing, and they are often ridden by guys who are attracted to them because they're cheap. We talked about that. They just do not perform well in this kind of situation because they are so specifically designed and engineered for their application, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do really well. Then what's an enduro bike? What's an enduro class bike? We talked about that. Heavier crankshaft, heavier flywheel, higher output electrics. Often you have lighting. You have a more compliant suspension. You have a more adjustable suspension, even though there are some dings here that are widely known about the WP Explorer series. They still do offer some adjustability that does produce some results. So if you are a desert rider, trail rider, then this is a class of bike. Those are the engineering inputs that you're looking for. A little more mild camshaft, a little better bottom end. You yield some to the mid-range and the top end against a motocross bike, but much more forgiving to ride, much more luggable. So that's the separation. So I think for the 1000, for the Baja 1000, for those guys, you'll probably still see guys who will turn their nose up at this because it is not based on the motocross bike itself. It has the heavier internals like we talked about. And so there will be guys who will say, nope, don't want that. That's a street bike. And they'll stay true to their motocross conversions where they take those XCFs primarily and they crack them open, throw in a 6 gear, and they cobble together the electrical system, which is fully viable. It's been done for years, and it'll continue to be done. I guarantee it. There are a bunch of guys, though, who don't want to screw around with that, and that's just the reality, too, like we've been describing. A wide-open desert race is not a drag race. So having that explosive, immediate, electric power out of a MX powertrain is totally not needed. It's fun, and in the hands of a very experienced professional racer, he knows what to do with it. He can handle it. In amateur classes or just vet series or trail riders or non-professional racers and even professional racers, this bike will be their choice. So you'll still have the two camps. Lots of guys in the comments are going to say, nope, not for me. Now that I know that it's not based on the true motocross bike, they'll say that's an enduro bike, that's a vet bike, and they'll take a pass. But I'm confident this machine right here will be a podium bike in all the desert series, all the wide open series, and this is going to be on the back of motorhomes. This unit right here, you're going to see it on the trails. This is going to be in Idaho. This is going to be all over the place. So our goal, just to sum this up and wrap it up, what we're going to do is for Baja use, which is what we've picked this bike for, we're going to we ride roads down in Baja. You connect trails down there. So we're going to make this thing streetable. We're going to throw our in-house custom Taco Moto dual sport kit. We're going to throw that on there. So it'll have all of the electrics that the EXC has. And we will, like I said, we'll throw an exhaust and an ECU at it, change up the tires, mousse, suspension. We may go nutty and throw a tower on this and see what this would do as a rally bike. Now there's a really good application. Rally bike. Throw a tower, all the electrics, 196 watts, 450. I think this also will become a very attractive bike for that class of rider. and builder. So very smart move to put this bike out. I love it. I'll probably end up doing a year-long experiment on this one. Spend 1 year, take it to Baja, do all kinds of stupid stuff with it, put it in situations that it wasn't really designed for. I think we'll get into some aggressive Idaho single track with it and see how it does. At that, if we do that, we'll throw a Recluse on it, CX. We'll probably leave the gearing the same, so it's 1452. Very good single track gearing. A lot of single track out here in the desert. Did really well. So that's our summary right now of this machine. If it's the right bike for you, you will not be disappointed at all. The only consideration might be to wait for next year. Next year, this same machine will be updated to the new generation platform, new generation chassis. So that would be my only asterisk beside everything we've said and everything we've looked at. That new generation chassis is exceptional. So if you got to have the 450 right now, you don't mind running the old chassis, and there's fans of it, and I've been reading in some of the forums where some of the feedback on the new, it's just new. The new platform's new, so guys are getting used to it. They're trying to figure it out. The aftermarket, we're still studying it, evaluating it, tearing it apart, trying to figure it out. So there's just the familiarity factor. This chassis is now going into its 4th year, and aftermarket support is 100%, and everybody's used to this one, and everybody knows it and is very familiar with it. So if that's kind of your situation, it's sorted out. There aren't any, as far as, new models. So is this a new model? Technically, yes, but we've already covered why it's not a new model. It's sort of a legacy model with just a new twist, right? This is based on the 20 plus 500, which is now going into its 4th year. So there are no reliability issues other than the known ones, and we've talked about them many times. You have basically fuel pump, fuel tank related issues, and Taco Moto's addressed all of those, and we have fixes and updates for everything there. So in the comments, please let me know what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. If you have one of these, I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to know what you're doing with them and how you're modding it out. Do you see any weaknesses in it that I haven't noticed? And I hope to hear back from everybody. Thanks a lot for checking us out. Thanks for enjoying motorcycles. I love it when I meet you guys out there on the trails. I enjoy the sport. I enjoy what it does to my mental health. This is my therapist. I just got a new therapist. The relationship is beginning really strong. I think we have a really bright future together. And all go out and get some adventure.